I'm Erica Thompson, 29, and I built my career in disaster response from the ground up. No connections, no shortcuts, just long hours and a lot of trial by fire. For years, I bent over backwards to stay close to my family. I helped out whenever they needed it, put their comfort before my own, and kept believing that maybe, eventually, I'd earn their respect. But when they kicked me out without warning and told everyone I was spiraling, I made a decision that changed everything. Have you ever been dismissed or cast aside by the very people you tried so hard to support? If you have, drop your story in the comments. I read them all, and I promise, you're not the only one. Before I dive into how everything unfolded, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to draw the line with someone who didn't value you, go ahead and like this video and hit subscribe. Because what happened after they turned their backs on me? It didn't go the way they expected. My parents were obsessed with how things looked from the outside. The yard had to be trimmed every Saturday morning. We had matching family sweaters for Christmas photos. And no one ever talked about anything that made them uncomfortable. If you asked my mom, we were the kind of family other people looked up to, but only if you didn't look too closely. Growing up, I always felt like I was one step off the rhythm everyone else in the house followed. My brother, Lucas, was the golden child, captain of the debate team. Played tennis just long enough to get a few medals for the living room wall, then quit the second college applications went out. My sister, Ava, had this perfect balance of fake humility and polished charm. She never argued, never questioned anything. She just smiled, nodded, and got rewarded for it. I don't say that to be bitter, it's just what it was. I was the kid who asked why. Why we donated to certain charities but never actually volunteered. Why we acted friendly with people at church and then mocked them in the car ride home. Why I had to take business electives when I wanted to do environmental science. My mom used to say, "You're making things harder than they need to be." She'd sigh when I brought home a certificate for volunteering at the animal shelter instead of an honor roll award. My dad was more direct. "You think being nice is gonna get you anywhere in life?" he asked once after I spent the weekend organizing a donation drive. "Start thinking like a winner." Still, I tried. I wasn't some rebellious teenager slamming doors and sneaking out. I wanted to belong. I cleaned the house when no one asked. I helped my siblings with homework, picked up groceries after school, covered for Lucas when he stayed out too late and didn't want to get caught. At one point during senior year, when my parents threatened to cut my phone plan if I didn't take a business law class, I just nodded and signed up. I figured if I gave a little more, they'd give a little back. In college, things got harder to ignore. My dad told me he'd match whatever scholarships I pulled in. But when the tuition bill came, he said he didn't remember that conversation. I paid out of pocket from 2 part-time jobs while Ava got a fully funded photography trip to Italy. She posted pictures of her creative awakening. I picked up extra shifts, cleaning classrooms on campus. I remember coming home one weekend sophomore year. I'd just gotten certified in emergency response coordination. Nothing flashy, just a program that trained volunteers for natural disaster zones. I thought they'd be proud. My mom stared at the certificate, then said, "Is this even a job or just a hobby?" My dad barely looked up from his tablet. "So you're still doing that unpaid thing, huh?" I didn't argue. I never argued. I just kept thinking, if I could show them I had value, real, measurable value, they'd eventually change the way they saw me. I kept track of every hour I logged on the field, every training session, every certificate. I turned down parties and holidays to be available for deployments. I figured one day they'd see the full picture. But it was always the same. When Lucas got a job at a marketing firm, they hosted a dinner party. When Ava opened an Etsy shop, my mom printed out the logo and taped it to the fridge. When I spent 2 straight weeks coordinating supplies for a flood zone 2 states over, I got a text that said, "Hope you're eating well." There were moments, though, when I thought maybe something would shift. My aunt once pulled me aside during Thanksgiving and said she'd heard I was doing important work. I smiled, said thanks. A week later, she posted a family photo online with a caption about how all the kids were thriving. My name wasn't tagged. I'd be lying if I said it didn't wear me down, but I also didn't want to give up. I believed naively, maybe, that consistency mattered. That if I just kept doing the right thing, even when it wasn't noticed, eventually it would be. By the time I was 25, I had more field hours than most people twice my age. I'd coordinated evacuations during wildfires, managed logistics after hurricanes, helped set up temporary housing after a major apartment building collapse. None of it made the Christmas newsletter. My mom still described me as between jobs when friends asked what I was doing. Once, during a barbecue, I overheard my dad telling a neighbor I was figuring things out. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just liked the work. It was real. It mattered. And it didn't care where you came from, what you wore, or whether your parents approved of your life. It was the first place I ever felt useful without having to prove I belonged. But I never stopped hoping. I still called home. Still sent photos. I invited them to a recognition event once. Just a small thing. A team award for community impact. My mom said they were too busy that weekend. They were posting from a wine tasting an hour away. I think that was the first time I really felt it in my body. That hollow weight in your chest when you finally accept something you've been avoiding. I stood outside that auditorium, watching other people take photos with their parents and spouses, and I realized mine were never coming around. No matter how hard I worked, I'd always be the one who didn't fit. The one who made them uncomfortable. The black sheep they dressed up for photos, then quietly cropped out of the narrative. I didn't cry about it. I just went home, heated up leftover pasta, and went over the next week's deployment schedule. I had a team to train and a budget proposal due. Work kept me grounded. And maybe that was the point. I'd been trying to prove myself to people who were never going to see me. But the people who did, the ones on my team, the families we helped, they didn't need convincing. They just needed me to keep showing up. So I did, and I kept doing it, quietly for years, until one day everything shifted, not because I demanded it, but because something happened that no one could ignore, not even them. And when it did, their silence broke, not with an apology, but with a ringtone, over and over again. Looking back, the signs had always been there. They just got harder to ignore after I turned 21. That was the year Ava got her internship at a local design firm. Nothing fancy. She was mostly doing social media posts and fetching coffee, but you would have thought she got hired as creative director at Vogue. My dad gave her the keys to a brand new crossover. Said it was a reward for taking initiative. I asked if I could borrow the old minivan to get to a weekend logistics training. My mom looked at me and said, "We'll see." Then my dad added, "You should be grateful we still let you live here rent-free." I didn't argue. I found a ride from a friend and got there early. We practiced emergency evacuation protocols until midnight, then started again at 6 the next morning. No one asked me how it went when I got home. That became the pattern. Ava would post a selfie from her office and get 20 comments from family members congratulating her. I'd share an article I co-wrote on community response strategies, and my mom would text me to take it down because I sounded too political. My brother Lucas had started a job in sales around that time. He made decent money, but mostly talked about how boring it was. Still, every time he came over for dinner, my dad would brag about his sharp business mind. I once mentioned that I was coordinating disaster response for a mid-size region, and my mom changed the subject before I could finish the sentence. It was more subtle back then. They didn't insult me directly. They just made it clear I didn't fit the picture they wanted to show the world. They praised hard work, but only when it looked a certain way. Clean, conventional, easy to explain at a dinner party. Nothing about what I was doing fit into that mold. They stopped inviting me to some things. Or maybe I stopped asking. I'd hear about family barbecues after the fact. My aunt posted pictures from Ava's birthday brunch that I hadn't known was happening. When I mentioned it once, Ava said, "Oh, I thought you were working that weekend." I was, but no one had asked. Still, I tried to keep a foothold. I showed up to my cousin's baby shower. I bought a gift off the registry, helped fold chairs when it ended. My mom pulled me aside at one point and whispered, "Please don't talk too much about your job, okay? It stresses Nana out." I nodded. Then watched as Ava told the same story about designing a bakery's new logo to 3 different people. It wasn't just about being overlooked. It was the way they started reshaping the story. I'd hear secondhand that they told neighbors I was volunteering full-time. My dad once joked to a friend on the phone that I was still on her little adventure phase. I wasn't 19 backpacking across Europe. I was leading response coordination for wildfire zones across 2 states. At some point, they stopped asking what I was doing altogether. I'd call home, and the conversations got shorter. My mom would ask how I was, then pivot to Ava's newest side hustle or Lucas's new girlfriend. If I mentioned work, she'd respond with something like, "Well, as long as you're staying busy." I think what made it worse was that I didn't have anything flashy to point to. My work didn't come with awards or big job titles. I wasn't posting curated snapshots of success. I was in the field, managing logistics and making sure people had what they needed when everything else had fallen apart. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. There was one week where I coordinated supply drops for a small town hit by flooding. I slept in a cot in a church basement, showered at a fire station, and spent 14 hours a day rerouting shipments. We got clean water to every household before the deadline. When I finally got a break and checked my phone, there were 0 texts from my family. Not even a "how's it going?" That's when something shifted. I stopped trying to update them. I used to send short emails with photos or quick recaps. Just a few lines. Nothing emotional. I thought maybe if they saw it, if they understood the scale, they'd get it. But they never responded. Eventually, I stopped sending them. I still came home for the holidays that year. It was easier than arguing about it. We sat around the table while Lucas complained about his boss micromanaging him. My dad nodded sympathetically. Ava talked about a freelance project for a boutique hotel. My mom said she was so proud of her for going after her dreams. I didn't say much. At one point, my mom turned to me and said, "So, still doing that relief stuff?" I said yes. She nodded like I'd just confirmed I was still working at the town library. That's good. Keeping busy is important. Later that night, I helped clean the dishes. Just her and me in the kitchen. I asked her if she ever told people what I actually did. She gave me this look, half confusion, half discomfort. "What do you mean?" I said. "Do you ever tell people I run response teams, that I manage disaster operations?" She shrugged. "It's just hard to explain, honey. People don't really get that kind of thing." I went upstairs and packed early. I didn't say goodbye when I left in the morning. No one seemed to notice. Over the next few months, the gap grew. I'd call, and no one would pick up. When they did, the conversations felt like formal check-ins, like they were going through the motions. I'd see family posts online, vacations, celebrations, dinners I wasn't invited to. No one even pretended anymore. I told myself I didn't care. But it still hit when I saw them all dressed up at my cousin's wedding, smiling in photos, without a mention of me. I didn't even know the wedding had happened. I wasn't angry, not in the way people expect. It was more like this slow erosion, years of small cuts. At some point, the bleeding just stopped. I'd bled all I could. The funny thing was, I was finally starting to find my place in the world. My team was growing. We had real funding, real coordination with state and federal departments. I was asked to speak on a panel for emergency response strategy, but none of that mattered at home. None of that changed anything. Once, a childhood friend's mom reached out after seeing my name in a local news piece. She said she was proud, that she remembered how curious I'd been as a kid. She said, "I bet your parents are so proud of you." I didn't know what to say. I just said, "Thanks." I kept doing the work, and they kept pretending it didn't exist. And eventually, it stopped being about trying to prove anything. It became about surviving, about doing the job well, and building something that no one could take away from me. I didn't know it yet, but something was coming that would change the whole equation. Not just for me, but for them too. They just didn't know it was already in motion. And when it hit, it would be too big to ignore. It was late. I'd just come off a 14-hour shift coordinating logistics for a multi-county evacuation drill. Not a real disaster, but close. We'd simulated a gas leak near a residential zone. Schools, transit systems, hospitals, it all had to move like clockwork. I was proud of how it went. My team was starting to run without me having to jump in every 5 minutes. I drove home thinking maybe, this time, I'd tell my parents a little more. Maybe I'd even show them the after-action report. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. No porch light on, which was unusual. I unlocked the front door and saw a duffel bag by the stairs. Mine. Fully packed. Jacket draped across the top. I remember just standing there for a second, confused. At first, I thought maybe there'd been some kind of mix-up. A leak in my room? A renovation? It didn't make sense. Then I heard chairs shifting in the kitchen. My parents were sitting at the table like they'd been waiting. My dad had his arms crossed. My mom was holding a mug but not drinking from it. No one said anything for a second. Finally, my dad spoke. "You can stay with friends. You're not welcome here anymore." I looked at my mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I asked, "Why?" He didn't answer. She did. "We're done pretending you'll ever succeed." That was it. No argument, no explanation, just that. I said I needed to grab a few things from my room. My mom stood up and said, "It's all in the bag." Like they'd rehearsed it. I walked upstairs anyway. The door was already locked. I didn't even ask for the key. I sat on the steps for a minute and thought about what to say, but the only thing I could hear, over and over again, was her voice. That line, "Done pretending," as if the last 10 years had been some kind of performance. As if every shift, every deployment, every dollar I'd saved to stay afloat was just an act I was putting on to avoid real life. They didn't even wait for me to leave before changing the locks. My dad stood up and started walking toward the front door like he was going to hold it open for me. Like I was a guest. I picked up the bag. It was heavier than I expected. I said nothing. Neither did they. I slept in my car that night, parked behind the community center near my office. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just lay there, staring at the roof of the car, wondering what it was about me that made it so easy for them to walk away. The next day, I called a friend from the field team. She had a couch and no questions. I stayed with her for 2 weeks while I looked for something more permanent. Every part of me wanted to believe there'd been a mistake, that they'd call, that this had been a blow-up, not a final decision. But then I got a text from my cousin. "Hey, heard you left home again. Hope you're okay." Again. I called her. She said my parents had told the family I'd quit another job and was going through something. Said I'd left in the middle of the night, that they were worried but giving me space. I could barely respond. They hadn't just kicked me out. They'd rewritten the whole thing before I had the chance to say a word. A few days later, my aunt called. She asked if I needed anything. I told her I was fine. She paused and said, "Your mom mentioned you're struggling to hold things together." I said, "That's not true." She said, "Well, that's what she said." I hung up. The hardest part wasn't losing a place to sleep. I've been in worse conditions on deployment. It wasn't even the financial hit. I had a little saved. Enough to cover a deposit when I found a studio above a closed-down bakery. No laundry, one window that barely opened, but it was mine. The hardest part was realizing they didn't just give up on me. They needed to make sure everyone else did too. They didn't want a daughter who didn't fit the script, a daughter who didn't chase titles or status. So they cast me as the problem, said I was erratic, unstable, unmotivated, framed my work as a phase, framed my choices as failures. Every conversation they had after that point was a way to bury the truth a little deeper. I stopped going to family events. Not out of anger, just to avoid the performance. I couldn't sit across from people who thought I was some cautionary tale. I heard through friends that Lucas got engaged, that Ava launched a home decor blog, that my mom started volunteering for a foundation that hosted charity galas downtown. She wore a pin with the word hope on it. I remember seeing a photo and thinking, she must really believe she's the good guy. Meanwhile, I was pulling 60-hour weeks managing winter storm response plans, coordinating shelter staffing, training new recruits. I stopped posting updates entirely. There didn't seem to be a point. The people who mattered already knew what I did. The ones who didn't never cared to find out. I kept the duffel bag. I never unpacked it, just shoved it in the back of my closet. Sometimes I'd glance at it and feel that same weight in my chest. Not sadness, not even grief, just resignation. I think what stung the most was how easily they made it about them. How fast they turned me into the unreliable one. As if the problem had never been how little they saw me, but how loud I was for asking to be seen at all. They told people I was dramatic, that I made things harder than they needed to be, that I refused help when it was offered. It didn't matter that I was never offered anything. It didn't matter that every milestone I hit, I did alone. They had a story they needed to tell, and I didn't have a seat at the table anymore to contradict it. So I let them talk. I let them build the version of me they could tolerate, and I focused on the version of me that could survive, the one who didn't need their validation, who knew the work mattered, even if no one sent flowers for it. What I didn't know then, what they couldn't possibly predict, was how fast the story was about to change. And this time, I wouldn't need to explain a thing. All I had to do was wait. Because the world was about to see me. And whether they liked it or not, so were they. For the first few days, I moved on autopilot. My body kept going because it had to. I went to work, answered emails, coordinated shipments. No one on my team knew I was living out of my car. I parked 2 blocks from the office so they wouldn't see. Used the community center showers before my shifts. Ate instant noodles with a plastic fork in the passenger seat. Slept in a hoodie with the hood pulled low so I wouldn't have to make eye contact with anyone walking by. It wasn't pride. It was survival. If I stopped to feel it, I didn't know what would happen. On the 3rd night, I got lucky. A coworker offered her couch while she went out of town for a few weeks. I said yes without asking how long. Slept there, kept the place spotless, replaced her dish soap without being asked. I didn't want to be a burden. I just needed a roof. During the day, I took every shift I could. Volunteered for weekend coordination. Picked up site visits no one wanted. It kept me busy. It gave me something to measure. At the end of the day, I could look at a checklist and say, that's what I did today. There wasn't much room for anything else. But at night, when everything went quiet, the thoughts came back. I'd lie awake and play it all over in my head. How they'd looked at me, what they'd said, what they didn't say. I'd scroll through old texts and try to pinpoint when exactly things had turned. What I'd done to make them stop seeing me as one of their own. The worst part was, there wasn't a moment. It hadn't happened all at once. It was a slow removal, like they'd been edging me out of the frame 1 inch at a time, until suddenly I wasn't in the picture at all. I thought about reaching out. Not to apologize, I had nothing to apologize for, but just to ask, why? But every time I picked up the phone, I'd remember that night at the kitchen table. The duffel bag. My dad's voice. You're not welcome here anymore. It played like a recording. Cold, practiced, final. So I stopped trying. I didn't call. I didn't send updates. I let birthdays pass without a message. I let the silence grow. And the strange thing was, once I stopped trying to force a connection, everything else started to feel lighter. I still had pain, of course, but I also had space. I started spending more time with people who knew the real version of me, not the version my family had shaped, not the girl they pitied or tolerated or ignored. I rented a room above a bakery on the edge of town. The pipes clanged every morning when the ovens fired up, but the smell of fresh bread made it feel like something close to home. I found a rhythm. Worked 6 days a week, trained junior coordinators, built contacts with other regional offices. My name started showing up in more meetings. People asked for my opinion, not just my output. Still, I never talked about the personal stuff. If someone asked about my family, I'd say, "We're not close." That was it. No explanation, no bitterness. Just a clean break. There was one night, maybe 5 months after I moved out, when an old friend from school called. She'd seen a post about a relief effort I helped lead. Said it was impressive. Said I was really making a name. I laughed, told her I was just doing the work. Then she said, "Your parents must be proud." I didn't respond. I think the silence said enough. What she didn't know was that in all that time, they'd never reached out. Not once. Not when the news ran a segment on a shelter system I helped redesign. Not when I was listed in a statewide report on emergency management reform. Nothing. I used to think that success would fix it. That if I did enough, showed enough, became enough, they'd have no choice but to see me. But the truth is, they'd made their choice already. And no amount of good press or polished talking points was going to unmake it. The only thing I could control was who I became outside of them. And slowly, I started to see that version of myself more clearly. Not through their eyes, but through the eyes of the people who trusted me, who worked beside me, who followed me into places most people would run from. I stopped chasing closure. I started building consistency. I made sure the people around me knew they could count on me. I didn't make big speeches or post inspirational quotes. I just showed up, every day, no matter what. Over time, my reputation shifted. People started inviting me to speak on panels. I got offered a training contract that paid better than anything I'd done before. My inbox filled with people asking for insight, support, mentorship. None of it changed how my parents saw me, but it changed how I saw myself. The relief work wasn't glamorous. There were weeks where I lived out of hotels, where I slept 3 hours a night and spent my days in rubber boots sorting supplies in ankle-deep water. But I felt more grounded there than I ever had sitting at their kitchen table. I remember one moment in particular, standing in a parking lot that had been converted into a food distribution site after a hurricane. It was hot, chaotic, noisy, but everything was moving. People were getting what they needed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. I just was. That was the turning point. Not a big moment, just a quiet one. I realized I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I didn't need to win them back. I didn't need to be invited. I had my place, and it was earned, not given. The funny thing is, I still kept the voicemail from my aunt. The one where she said, "I hope you're getting help." I never responded. But sometimes I'd listen to it just to remind myself how deep the fiction had gone. They'd crafted an entire story about me, and then asked the world to believe it. And for a while, I did too. Not anymore. I knew where I stood, and I knew what mattered. I couldn't rewrite the past, but I could decide what came next. And I had a feeling the next chapter would be different. Not because they changed their minds, but because the world was starting to take notice. And this time, the silence wouldn't protect them. Not from the truth. Not from me. It started like any other deployment. The alert came in late on a Tuesday. Dry lightning had sparked multiple blazes across the northern ridge. By Wednesday morning, we had smoke warnings, spot evacuations, and power outages across 3 counties. Our coordination center went live at 5:42 a.m. sharp. By then, I was already in the car. I'd spent the last 2 years building credibility, running field teams, streamlining supply routes, fixing communication gaps between local responders and state agencies. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I didn't want to see people standing in parking lots waiting for help that never came. This time, I was lead operations for the entire northern sector. It was the kind of assignment that didn't come with sleep. Our first task was mapping evacuation routes in areas where GPS had gone out. Then came setting up temporary shelters, sourcing cold storage for insulin, rerouting food shipments when the highway closed. We had a 6-hour window to clear a residential area near the burn zone. My team moved fast, door-to-door checks, volunteer buses, pet transfers. We didn't lose anyone. Not one. At the end of day 2, I posted a short update on our internal network. Just one sentence. We're holding the perimeter. No injuries today. That was it. No hashtags, no photo. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I just wanted the team to know they'd done something right. 3 days later, someone forwarded me a link. A local paper had picked up the story. The headline wasn't about me, it was about the response effort. But my name was there, twice. In the third paragraph, quoted on logistics. In the final paragraph, listed as the lead field coordinator. I didn't think much of it at first. A few colleagues congratulated me. Someone brought donuts to the ops tent and joked that I'd made it. I smiled, said thanks, went back to the call I was on. But then the calls started coming in. Not from my parents. Not yet. From media teams. From the governor's liaison. And then from the mayor's office. They wanted to organize a public recognition event. Nothing huge, the coordinator said. Just a way to highlight the work you and your team did. They'd already reached out to my department head. Everyone was on board. I said yes. Not for the cameras, not for the headline, but for the team. They'd earned it. We all had. The press conference was scheduled for the following Thursday. City Hall Plaza. Afternoon slot, peak news cycle. I wore black slacks and a clean polo with our logo embroidered on the chest. Simple. Professional. The kind of outfit that didn't try too hard. There were chairs lined up under a white canopy. A podium. A handful of reporters. The mayor stood next to a printed banner that said, "Local Heroes." He shook my hand when I arrived. Said thank you, twice. I stood off to the side while he spoke. I didn't expect much. A general thank you. Maybe a list of agencies. But then he said my full name. Clear. Unrushed. Said I'd led a flawless evacuation operation. Said I'd save lives with no headlines, no noise, just strategy, coordination, and grit. My photo was taken. My name ran in the news. A clip aired on local TV that night. And I knew, without needing confirmation, that someone back home had seen it. It took less than 24 hours for the messages to start. First, it was my aunt. Wow. Just saw the clip. You must be over the moon. Then my cousin. I didn't know you were working with the city now. Your mom must be so proud. By the next morning, my phone had 6 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. Let it ring. A voicemail came through. I listened to it twice before deleting it. It was my mother. She didn't start with hi. She started with, "I don't know if you're still angry, but," and then launched into a soft, rehearsed kind of voice. Said she'd seen the news. Said it was nice to know I was doing okay. Then she paused, said, "Maybe we could talk soon." I didn't respond. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, cross-legged, eating takeout, and listening to the silence. I thought about how fast the tide had turned. For years, I'd been the story they didn't want to tell. And now, here they were, scrambling to catch up, to reattach themselves to the narrative. I knew how it would go. First the congratulations, then the rewrites, then the slow, subtle attempt to fold me back into the family unit, without apology, without ownership. They'd act like the years of silence had been some kind of misunderstanding, like the duffel bag never happened. The mayor said my name in front of a crowd, and suddenly I was worth something again. I could have picked up the phone. I could have answered her call and listened, but I'd done that before. And every time, it led back to the same place. A seat at a table where I was expected to stay quiet, be grateful, ask for nothing. I wasn't angry, I was just done. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need a headline. I didn't need my mother to pretend she'd always believed in me. All I needed was to know that when it mattered, when lives were on the line and the margins were razor thin, I had shown up. I had led. I had delivered. The rest? Background noise. A few days after the press conference, a reporter reached out. She wanted to do a profile. Said her editor was looking for human interest stories. Unsung women in leadership. I said no. I didn't want to be a headline. I just wanted to get back to work. She sent a follow-up message. If you change your mind, I think your story could help a lot of people. I still haven't replied. Because my story wasn't about winning something. It wasn't a redemption arc. It was about surviving the long stretch between being ignored and being acknowledged, and learning to live without needing either one. The recognition came, and so did the calls, but I didn't go back. Not to them, not to that house, not to the kitchen table where they told me I'd never make it. I stayed where I was, in the field, on the job, focused. Because that's the thing no one tells you about walking away. If you keep walking long enough, eventually, they're the ones trying to catch up. The clip didn't explode immediately. It started as a slow burn, shares from local officials, a few neighborhood groups reposting it with captions like, "Proud of our city," or "Leadership in action." I didn't even see it at first. I was back in the field, helping coordinate the post-evacuation transition, returning displaced families, getting food service back online, managing media access. I had emails to return, supply gaps to fix. I wasn't thinking about the press conference. But by day 3, the clip had spread beyond city limits. A larger regional outlet picked it up. Then one of the national disaster response networks reposted it with a quote from the mayor. My inbox started filling up. A LinkedIn request every 5 minutes. Colleagues from other states forwarded screenshots. Even a few old classmates sent messages. Is this you? Just saw this and thought of you. You always knew what you were doing, huh? Congrats. Most of it was polite noise. People showing up because attention attracts attention. But then I saw the names. People I hadn't heard from in years. A girl I'd shared a dorm with sophomore year. A former volunteer who ghosted halfway through a program. My cousin. My aunt. A second cousin who once called me directionless at a Christmas dinner, now tagging me in a post that said, "So proud of my amazing family." And then came the voicemails. 2 missed calls from my dad's number, 1 from the landline, then 5 messages in a row, 1 from my mom, the others from relatives. All different tones. 1 upbeat, 1 cautious. 1 trying to sound casual. They're so proud now, my aunt said. They just didn't know how to say it before. They miss you. This is big for them. You should talk to them. Don't hold on to anger. Everyone makes mistakes. I listened to them once, then deleted all but 1. The last one, from my mother. She sounded like she was trying very hard not to sound rehearsed. We saw the video, the one with the mayor. You looked strong. I hope you're well. We're all talking about it here. Ava showed us your name in the article. Then, quieter. We'd like to catch up. If that's something you'd be open to. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the response center dashboard, and got back to work. That week, I saw a Facebook post from my dad's account. A photo of me from years ago, maybe high school, holding a clipboard at a donation event. He'd captioned it, "She's always had a heart for service. Couldn't be prouder of our girl." There were comments underneath. Friends from church saying how amazing I was, asking how I'd gotten into this line of work, congratulating him. I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. I didn't correct them. Let them have the fiction. I knew the real story. I knew what they'd said when I asked for help. When I asked to stay. When I told them this was what I wanted to do. I knew the exact words my mother used the night she told me to leave. So no, I didn't reach out. I let them sit with a version of me they'd finally decided to celebrate. Curated, distant, safe. The version who looked good in front of a podium and made them seem like supportive parents. The truth was messier. The truth didn't make for easy captions. While they were sharing the clip, I was back on site, helping restructure the emergency alert system for the next fire season. We had funding now, real funding, and a bigger team. I started mentoring new hires. Did the hiring myself sometimes. My name was mentioned in planning meetings I wasn't even in. It wasn't fame, it was reach. Quiet reach. the kind that changes how decisions get made. There was a moment, maybe 2 weeks after the press conference, when I was reviewing a case file for a new coordinator. She'd been a junior tech in a nearby town. Barely any formal training, but her field notes were sharp, her reports precise. I approved her transfer and left a note, "Give her room to lead." It hit me later that no one had ever done that for me, and now I could do it for someone else. That was the shift. I stopped thinking about who hadn't believed in me and started focusing on who could become something if someone just stood behind them for once. I kept getting tagged. Posts, articles, local news spots. They used phrases like unsung hero and self-made. My parents never corrected them. Never mentioned that for years they'd referred to my work as a phase, that I'd slept in my car, that they'd changed the locks while my things were still inside. I watched as they rebranded themselves. Suddenly they were proud. Suddenly they remembered things differently. I heard from a friend who bumped into Ava at a wedding. She said my sister had talked for 10 minutes straight about me, about how incredible I was, about how she'd always known I'd do something important. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so familiar. The rewrite. The clean version. I could have exposed it, could have posted my own version, could have sent screenshots, receipts, timestamps, but I didn't, because none of that would have changed anything. The point wasn't to prove they were wrong. The point was that I'd already built a life where their approval wasn't required. And in that life, things were changing fast. We were expanding our coordination zone. I was asked to consult for a state-level policy group. I said yes. The work mattered. It had consequences. It saved people. That's where I chose to put my energy. Still, late at night, I'd get these texts, short, vague ones, from family members who hadn't spoken to me in years. Thinking of you. Hope things are good. Mom was asking about you. I never replied. I wasn't angry. I just had better things to do. People talk a lot about closure like it's a conversation, like you sit across from someone and unpack everything. But for me, closure was this: logging off after a 12-hour shift, walking into my apartment, cooking a quiet meal, and knowing I was exactly where I needed to be. No one had given it to me. I'd built it. And they could either live with the silence they created or learn to speak a different kind of truth. But it wouldn't come from me. Not anymore. It had been almost 7 months since the press conference when the next message came. Not a tag, not a forwarded article, just a voicemail. I didn't see it right away. I'd left my phone on silent most of the afternoon while leading a logistics review for a new evacuation plan. We were finally piloting the automated communication system I'd pushed for. One text could now notify over 5,000 households in real time. It had taken 18 months to get funding approved. That kind of progress was what I paid attention to now. Later that night, I sat down with a cup of tea and checked my phone. One missed call, my mom's number. I stared at it for a long time before pressing play. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Not weak, but stripped down, less filtered, like the effort of holding it together wasn't worth it anymore. We were wrong, about everything. She didn't elaborate, didn't qualify it, or pad it with excuses. There was a pause, long enough to make me think she might hang up. Then she added, "I don't expect anything. I just needed you to hear it." She hung up without saying goodbye. I listened to it twice. Then I sat with it, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I wanted to be sure that I wasn't doing it out of habit. For years, I'd run toward any version of acceptance they offered, no matter how small. But this wasn't that. I didn't feel pulled. I felt steady. So I called back. Not to patch things up, not to sweep everything under the rug. I just wanted to know if the voice in the message matched the one that answered the phone. It did. She sounded surprised to hear from me. Not cheerful, just surprised. She said thank you. I said, I'd be open to meeting, just to talk. We agreed on a coffee shop halfway between our neighborhoods. Public. Neutral. No expectations. It was raining when I got there. I wore a dark coat and sat at a back table facing the door. She was 5 minutes late, but she came alone, without an umbrella, hair damp at the edges. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence, like she'd finally put something down that she'd been carrying for years. She sat, folded her hands around the cup without sipping. We talked about the weather, the roads, nothing important, and then she said, "I've watched that clip 100 times." I didn't respond. I let the silence do its job. She said, "I didn't know how to call after it aired. I kept thinking about everything we said to you, everything we didn't say." I nodded, still didn't speak. I wanted to be the kind of parent who could say, "We're proud," but I didn't know how to be proud of something I didn't understand. That line caught me, because it was probably the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. I finally said, "I wasn't asking for pride. I just wanted to be seen." She nodded slowly. "I know that now." We sat in silence again. She reached for her coffee, then stopped. "I told people you were lost," she said. "Not because I believed it, because I didn't want to admit you'd walked away from us on purpose." I could have corrected her, that they were the ones who pushed me out, but I didn't. That part didn't matter anymore. She asked if we could try again. I said, "We can't go back, but we can start from now." We set boundaries. No rehashing. No revisionist history. No inserting themselves into my story, as if they'd been there the whole time. If they wanted to be in my life, it had to be on current terms. Real ones. Respectful ones. She agreed. And to her credit, she's kept to it. It wasn't some warm reunion. There were no tears, no long hug in the parking lot. We shook hands, which felt strange at first, then oddly appropriate. Like two people coming to a truce neither of them thought would happen. Over the next few months, we saw each other twice. Once for lunch, once for a community fundraiser I helped organize. She came and stayed quiet, listened to other people talk about the work, didn't try to insert herself, didn't interrupt. The rest of the family stayed quiet. No calls from my dad, nothing from Ava or Lucas. I didn't expect it, I didn't need it. Because this wasn't about repairing a family unit, it was about clarifying the terms of my life, making it known that if they wanted access, it came with conditions, truth, boundaries, respect. A few weeks after that fundraiser, she sent me a text. Just a photo of a flyer for an emergency prep workshop. "Thought of you," she wrote. I sent back a thumbs up. That was all. It's strange how quickly things can shift when you stop hoping for the perfect version of something, when you let go of the need to be fully understood and just ask to be met where you are. I didn't expect anything from her. And that's probably why I could finally hear her. There's still distance. There probably always will be. But it's no longer hostile, just measured, chosen. I don't get invited to every family gathering. But I also don't hear my name being misused at them, either. There's peace in that. And when people ask now, coworkers, friends, new team members, I don't stumble when I talk about my family. I just say, "We've been through things. It's better now," in a way that works for me. No one needs the details. The ones who matter already know them. The ones who don't won't know the difference. The point is, I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not apologizing for making it without them. And I'm not asking anyone to rewrite the past just to feel comfortable in the present. She tried. That matters. But I'm still writing this from my apartment. Still doing the work. Still leading teams and showing up for people who need it. That hasn't changed. The story didn't end with forgiveness. It didn't need to. It just moved forward. That was over a year ago. Since then, I've led 3 more major response efforts, 2 wildfires, 1 major flood event that displaced over 40 people. I helped redesign our triage protocols for mobile medical units and introduced a centralized dispatch model that's now being piloted statewide. The work keeps growing. And the reach does, too. Our team received federal recognition last month, a formal citation, plaque included. I didn't go to the ceremony. One of my deputies accepted it on our behalf. I stayed on site, running a late-stage logistics review. It felt like the right choice. Let them shine. Let the work keep moving. A few weeks after that, I signed the paperwork on my first apartment. Not a rental, a place I actually own. Top floor of a modest building near the park. 2 bedrooms, clean lines, small balcony. I painted the walls myself. Chose a pale blue for the office. Something calm. At night, I sleep with the window open and wake up to birds instead of sirens. It's the first place I've ever lived where I didn't feel like I had to earn my stay. I still wake early. Still check my phone before I brush my teeth. Some habits don't change, but the urgency is different now. It's less about proving I belong and more about making sure the right people are in the right places. Leadership has a different weight when you stop needing it to fill a hole. My parents come around, sometimes. They don't bring up the past. They don't mention the duffel bag, or the voicemail I never answered, or the years they spent rewriting my life to suit their comfort. But they show up to things now. Not every event, but the ones I invite them to. Quietly, cautiously, like guests in a room they're not sure they're allowed in. My mom asks about my work sometimes. My dad doesn't. He sticks to the weather, traffic, general updates about people I don't speak to anymore. But I see it, the way they look at me now. There's a quiet hesitancy behind their eyes, like they're still trying to reconcile the woman in front of them with the version they told everyone I was. Sometimes I wonder what they say now, when people ask. I don't check. I don't need to. Because the version of me they used to describe, the black sheep, the one who was figuring it out, the one who'd walked away from family support, she's gone. Not because I fixed her, but because I stopped letting them define her in the first place. I've already built a life where their approval doesn't matter. I mentor a few junior coordinators now. One of them asked me recently how I stayed so calm under pressure. I told her the truth, because I've already been through worse. She laughed, thought I was joking. I didn't correct her. Another asked me if I'd ever had doubts about whether I belonged in this field. I told her yes, every day for years. And that eventually, I stopped waiting for permission. That's what makes the difference. I try not to give advice unless I'm asked. But if someone really listens, if they want to understand, I tell them this. There will always be people who can't see you, who choose not to. It's not your job to make yourself smaller so they'll feel right about ignoring you. It's your job to do the work anyway, to become someone they can't rewrite. The legacy isn't the plaque on the wall or the segment on the evening news. It's the system we built, the people who stayed, the team that calls at 2 a.m. because they trust you'll pick up, the communities that sleep a little safer because of a plan you wrote. That's the part no one can take away. I still keep the old duffel bag. It's in the back of my closet. Not because I need the reminder, but because I want to remember what it felt like to carry everything I owned without knowing where I'd land. That's part of the story too. Every once in a while, I get an invitation to speak at panels. I usually say no, I don't like the spotlight. But sometimes I send someone else, someone who's just starting out, who hasn't been handed much, but keeps showing up anyway. I write them a short intro, 1 line. They get it done. That's the only title I ever wanted. As for my parents, I let them come to the next team recognition dinner. I didn't sit with them. They watched from a table near the back, clapped when my name was mentioned, and left before dessert. I got a text the next morning from my mom. You looked composed. We were proud. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, just because it wasn't necessary. The story had already moved on. The life I have now isn't built on resentment. It's built on repetition. Showing up, fixing what's broken. Not for applause, but because it needs to be done. The rest? Background noise. There's something freeing about not needing to be understood. About knowing who you are, even if no one claps for it. About walking into a room and not scanning it for approval. I didn't set out to prove anything. I just stopped asking for space and started making it. And that's what stuck. That's the legacy. Thanks for watching my story. Have you ever been shut out by people who were supposed to stand by you? What did you do when they tried to come back around? Drop your experience in the comments. I want to hear it. And if you've ever had to choose your peace over their approval, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true stories about setting boundaries and finding your voice. You're not alone.